everyone has someone at the top of the house who sets a set of business objectives for that company for the year. Like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. They're specific and they're measurable. And then every single leader that works underneath that owner, CEO, founder, then is going to make this really long list of risks that could go wrong that would be their fault. Like, if I'm a sales leader and we have a goal to grow 40% in the enterprise and I don't find enough talent to hit that, well, that's a me problem.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we have a very special interview ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days like today, we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. And occasionally you get a mic drop episode from our founder, Matt, where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and thinks you should know. And as a reminder, if you like the content that we share here on the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, today it's a bittersweet day. It's the 5th and final installment of our month-long series deep diving into all things account-based prospecting. As a reminder, we recently launched our new product, Account-Based Prospecting, ABP for short, which is the recruitment industry's first native prospecting engine. So what the heck does that mean? With B2B data enrichment for both contacts and companies, ABP eliminates fragmented workflows and expensive third-party subscriptions to help you find and contact the right decision makers at your target client companies. So as we get into this last installment of the series, we're going to go deep into the tail end of the sales side of things. We've engaged the prospect, we've piqued their curiosity and have conversations going with them. Now for the most important part, how do we actually win their business? So with today's guest, we have someone who I'm constantly learning from on this subject, someone who breaks down common problems in closing deals and provides real talk about what went wrong versus letting deals close due to things that we can actually control. So the guest, we have Jen Allen, founder of Demand Gen, and she's joining us for round 2 after stopping by last year in episode 119. Definitely make sure that you go give that listen if you haven't yet. So today we're going to get into why most prospecting messaging falls flat, how we should actually be approaching our prospecting, competing against the status quo, and how to get deals across the finish line. All right, Jen, that was a heck of a spiel of an intro. Welcome back to the show.
I am so happy to be back. I had the best time last time, and I'm just now realizing that last time I didn't have glasses. So if that ages me, here we are.
Doesn't age you. It makes you sophisticated and mature.
You're
the wise one. The wise one. Yes, exactly. So yeah, we spent a lot of time last time talking about just like outselling the status quo. This is something recruiters hear all the time. It's like, no, we've got a recruitment team. We're fine. Or, Jimmy has a great network. We'll find someone in that. Or we're going to post it on Indeed. LinkedIn actually is getting more applicants than ever before. I'm sure we'll find the perfect person there. So there's no shortage of status quo going on there. But before we get into how do we actually beat that, I was laughing the other day when I came across one of your posts that says, no CXO was ever wowed by a seller hitting Control-C, Control-V on a generic cold email template written by marketing. Tell me a little about that one.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, I spend a lot of my time reading cold email, which is like the opposite of what anybody actually that is normal enjoys doing. But I teach it to sellers. And so I spend a lot of time understanding what do people do. And one of the things that I was in sales for 18 years, I certainly have been in this situation, but one of the things I see a lot is we often operate from this position of how do we make the job easier for ourselves? So like the number of times I hear, how do we scale this? How do we make this more efficient? How do we do this faster? I would say it's like 10 times more as a result of our AI era. But in that, sometimes I think what we lose is the focus on the buyer. So as much as it is nice to say, hey, let me push a button, copy paste this message that someone wrote, and then just blast it to anybody who has remotely near a job title that we might be interested in. If you look at it from the other side, it's so rare to meet a buyer who would say like, gosh, I get so much thoughtful outreach. And I really feel like this was a message written for me, right? And so I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in how do we make ourselves more efficient that we forget there's an actual human being on the other side of it. And so my comment about like, nobody wants that is because sometimes in sales, I think we just kind of forget the golden rule of like do unto others how you'd want to, oh my God, I just butchered the golden rule, but what you want done to yourself. I clearly wasn't
Everyone
paying
listening knows what
attention
you're
to
going at.
kindergarten.
Yep. No,
So
that's
that's
so
what I
true.
mean, right? It's like if you focus so much on how do I make the job easier, there's no shortage of ways to do that for yourself today, but there's still a human being on the other side. And there's a great Dale Carnegie quote from like 1937, which is so funny because like the best sales advice I think has been through the test of time. And it says, if you want to be interesting, be interested. And being interested means putting your reader ahead of your own selfish needs.
Yeah. It's, God, we are in the age of efficiency. And everyone thinks efficiency encompasses value and everything else. But the reality is it's like, you almost have these two curves that we're in this time where it's like, you can go up to the right. And it is this like non-linear, just ramping up. What's exponential curve? I failed calculus in college. I'm sorry.
I didn't even take it, so you're good.
Lucky for you. I had to take it twice if I wanted that degree. So you have this efficiency curve and everyone's like, oh, if we get more efficient, it's going to work well. But what you also have is an effectiveness curve. And there is an intersecting point where it's like you have efficiency going up and then you hit this sweet spot where you're like, perfect. Hey, we've got this down pat. But the more efficient you get sometimes with that, less effective things start to come out. And that's this like, we're so efficient, guys. Do you see we can now send 1,000 of these emails? Or this is so, there's a big trade-off there that I don't think enough of us are being mindful of. And that, like you said, it just comes from take a step back, take your seller hat off and get in the shoes of the recipient.
100%. I love the way you articulated that. And I think it's, of course, you need to find efficiency in like the sales motion that you have. But my philosophy on this when we're talking about prospecting is you can either try to write like one great email for 1,000 people, which is actually kind of impossible, right? Like what I have to default to is just talking about myself. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense to everybody. And like our solution. Or I could say, why don't I write one great email for one ideal account? And then on the other side of that, say, how can I now go out and find 20 other accounts who are up against the same thing? And I think that's like, you can't like have a conversation in this day and age without talking about AI, but like you can then say, you can prompt AI and say, okay, this is the problem. Find me 10, 20 other companies where the CEO has talked about this same problem, cite your evidence. And now what you can do is you can still achieve scale, but you've written a great message that actually means something. But now you're using scale to find others who you can send that to. So I think it's like do the hard work at the end of one and then see who else would also want to hear that message versus trying to write some phenomenal message for 1,000 people, which I think is just really hard to do.
It's unreal. Yeah. And I mean, it comes back to relevance. It's like personalization. I think, who was it? We had Kyle Coleman on last year and we were talking about the difference between personalization and relevance. And it's this exact thing, like personalization. Hey, saw you went to Michigan, go blue. Hey, first name at company. It's like, yeah, you can personalize that. But like the relevance, like you said, the more relevant you can be, not just like, hey, saw that you operate in Pennsylvania. Cool. Okay. You've got it. You nailed a 2% opportunity to get to the right state, but it's more like the pain. It's like, oh, she understands what we're going through and everything else. And again, that's not going to scale to everyone, but that's enough to catch their attention, at least early on. And they might not know that it's completely copy and pasted, but they're so used to just like what's relevant. For those listening, just did the bunny ears on this to 10,000 person audience to like, no, this is actually only relevant to like 40 accounts that are probably going through something like this.
There's an example I give all the time when I teach sellers this, because I'm glad you brought up the personalization thing. Like I'm a nobody, I'm a one person sales training company, right? I'm not a CXO that like gets thousands and thousands of emails, but I get a lot like, hey, saw your post on Saturday about rescue dogs. Anyway, we're the leading provider of IT and engineering talent. And I'm like, A, what do you think I need IT and engineering talent for in a one-person sales training business? It just missed the mark on relevance. Versus if you do what you just described, which is think about what this company is trying to achieve first, which by the way is also easy to do now with AI. You don't have to read, 50-page 10Ks. Figure out what they're trying to do and then attach to that. So if a company just got Series D funding and the CEO is talking about, hey, we're moving up market, we can hypothesize that maybe that means if they've always been an SMB, now they're going to have to look for a different profile of seller. And maybe that's harder. And maybe they don't know where to fish for that. But like, I would want to see an email that leads with, saw your CEO talking about moving up market. Not sure if that means you're bringing on a different profile of seller, because that appeases what is always a selfish reader. And it's got to get to the point, in my opinion, early on in that email or that cold call.
So for anyone that's listening now and just listened to the episode with Morgan We're going to use that exact same framework, the not sure, to segue. I wonder where you learned that from. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But just saying, we've got two people who know how to sell, and they're both saying this. So anyone listening, like, I think that's your message. Like, this is how to position this type of statement. It's going to work.
I got to give it credit too. From where I learned from was Lavender. So Lavender AI, I worked there for a bit. They've analyzed 2 billion emails, and I forget the exact stat, but it was something like 25 to 30% improvement on reply rate when you use unsure tonality when you're talking about someone else's business. So the analogy I give is if I walk in and I like meet you at a happy hour and I'm like, oh, hey, Sam, I'm Jen. It looks like you really struggled to get dressed this morning. Do you need some assistance? You would be like, I don't want to talk to her anymore. But if I walked up to you instead and said, hey, I see that you've got a couple kids because you're holding your phone and maybe there's like the wallpaper of your kids. Gosh, isn't it so much harder to find time for yourself? Like finding time to go shop and empathizing instead of coming in from left field and being like, hey, it looks like you suck at your job and can't handle the responsibility. Oh. I just think sometimes, particularly in email, we say things we would never say in person because it's a faceless medium.
Yeah, that's so true. We think we're being helpful by pointing out this really like painful thing, like, oh, look at us from a pedestal. We solve for this. But like, yeah, I like that reframe of just like, get out of the email, pretend that you're seeing them in person. Would you walk up to the CEO of this company, this VP of sales, this head of IT? Hi, I'm Sam. You need help dressing. Like, would you actually do that? No, you wouldn't. So I like, yeah, just that little mental reframe. I think like I'm totally going to steal this now as I'm thinking about how we're communicating across marketing or BDRs. Like, it's so simple, but again, we just have to get out of our like sales marketing hats and just be humans for a minute.
I think if I never saw the phrase looks like you're struggling to ever again in a cold email, I would be a happy chick. Because again, nobody likes their flaws pointed out, particularly by someone who doesn't know them well. And that's the other thing I think we have to be mindful of. I had a manager who always said, like, you can be right and still wrong. And what he meant by that is like, you could be right. Maybe the company is struggling with something, but coming in and making your introductory message, like, I see how bad you suck at this, is wrong in its delivery. And so always coming from a place of empathy, what might make this hard for them to achieve what they're trying to set out instead of a place of judgment.
All right. So don't come in guns blazing. It's good. It's a good first start. Another topic that we've seen is like, you call it when sellers break character and being human. So there was an example of, I think something you posted, and then Michelle Afshar left a comment on it. I've got it pulled up if you want me to read through it, but if you remember the context or want to tee it up like beforehand, like what your post said, and then I'll read her follow-up to it. I think this will help illustrate, and then we can talk a little bit more about like why this actually works so well.
Yeah. So the original post or the post she wrote? Because I actually forget what my original.
Okay.
Read my post.
We can just go straight to the comment. It's fine. Like,
okay. I'm like,
so
I forget the origination of it.
Hey, we all do it. So Michelle left a comment on something like, honestly, as I'm reading my notes now, she commented, I left a comment.
I remember. Wait, I remember.
Okay. All right.
I was saying how like at the end of a sales cycle, sellers tend to be like, hey, I'm just checking in. Like, what's going on with the contract? When are we getting the contract back? It's all very selfish. And my point in my post was to say, like, when you do that, you become a nuisance to your buyer. Instead, like, seek to be helpful in the sense of like, hey, did we hit an unexpected roadblock? And be intentional about like using the language of we, not did you screw this up and hit an unintended roadblock? And then Michelle left the comment you were going to say.
Okay. Helpful context, yes. All right, Michelle, I left a comment asking how you want a seller to check in with you during the sales cycle. I like when the person selling to me talks to me normal. Hey, girl, legal do their thing yet? We kicking off tomorrow or not? She posts this screenshot of a text conversation that she had. She said a VP of sales followed up in a message and said, hey, girl, finance approving that budget or not? She said she replied right off the bat. She's like, still waiting on budget, but the minute it's there, she's going with you. Like, so much goodness in there. The human element of it, just the personality. Like how, I don't know. I pray that the word efficient never gets tied into this conversation or at scale, but like, what's the power of doing this? And especially as we're talking the context of account-based prospecting, like if you can really hone in on 50, 100, 500 accounts, whatever you're managing, how powerful does this, it doesn't have to be breaking character, but just like being human element come into play?
Oh my gosh, it's a absolutely a differentiator. So like Michelle is a VP at a massive company. And I think my thinking as a sales rep early in my career was like, oh, the bigger the company and the more senior the role, the more buttoned up I need to be,
Yep.
right? And so every email I wrote was like freaking 3 paragraphs long with the biggest words I could think of. And like I'm trying to impress someone thinking that's how they speak. The reason I love, because Michelle is so awesome. Like if you knew Michelle, you'd be like, this is totally her personality. The reason I love that she posted about it is because I think so many of us sellers feel that we have to take on this different persona. When if you think about what connects us as humans, some of the things that connect us are like humor, inside jokes, analogies, and metaphors that we can relate to. And those are all very human things. And so I think when you're taking an account based approach, it means you are treating these accounts differently and observing and following and engaging with the people that you are like looking to talk to in the places where they are, in this case LinkedIn, shows it's such a deep level of customer understanding that goes so far beyond any sales book, which is just like, hey, I am seeing you, I'm hearing you, and I'm respecting the way that you want to be communicated with. And it's like this bond, right? And Michelle talked about it. She was like, it was the funniest thing ever because I wasn't even talking to him, but he was listening. And I think that's how we all want to be treated as human beings, is like, give me the respect of listening even when you're not in the room, if it's possible. And it just created this like super magnetic moment. Now, what's interesting, and I put this in the post, is like it worked because he did it first. Like most sales tactics, if every other sales rep then saw that post and is like, hey girl, what's up the budget? Then it becomes a nuisance and it's annoying because it's unoriginal and not creative. So I think it speaks to the need to say like, I've got to really treat a buyer like a human being, because these are people that like probably watch Real Housewives at home and like, eat cheeseburgers at midnight after getting back from a game. Like they're normal people. We just tend to be so stiff that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to have those connection moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being genuine. Honestly, that's why I love podcasts too. Cause it's like, you get to see how people actually talk, think, laugh, like the face-to-face connection versus like, yeah, I know you said you're only a one-person founder. Jen, level up your game here. But if someone just saw your title, saw LinkedIn, like a cold email, they're thinking like, oh shit, Jen. Dear Jen, your business needs IT professionals. Sorry, I'm literally typing like a Cro-Magnon over here. Versus like they watch this podcast for 2 minutes and they're just like, oh, Jen, like, okay, I can talk to her in a heartbeat. But like that's what happens when you do the research, you take the time. And honestly, why I like this ABM approach is like, you don't have to sell to the world, nor should you, but figure out who do you really, really, really want to get in front of, have be a great customer, and like go spend the time to win their business, because it's not as competitive as you think once you start to hone in on that. Like just take the time, do the research, develop the relationship. You're going to win if you do everything right.
I could not agree more. And it is so wild to me that I still feel like something people debate. Like, how would you like to be treated by a sales rep? Do you want to be one person on a 1,000-person mailing list? Like, do you want to be someone that they're pestering, or do you want to be someone where they're like, hey, I saw you say this thing. It got me thinking this, and I have an idea for you. Like, I think we just sometimes lose it because we're so obsessed with the idea of selling. Selling is nothing more than just, change management, right? You've got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to be excited about it. And so much of that, to your point, comes through just being human and treating people as humans instead of an email address or a name in a CRM.
Yeah. I kind of wish. So we've got all these email sending tools. Everyone's biggest fear is that you send an email and you're just like, oh shit, everyone can see everyone this was just sent to. Just assume that even on the personalized ones, like if you just take that mindset, be like, would I be okay with this if this were to be, everyone were to see like, oh, this also went on to 7,500 other people.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the thick of it, the fun part. So in our scenario, why you're here, your expertise, we've got a deal in front of us. Morgan set the table for us. We've got the conversation going. You're in the room with the decision makers, the different people that need hiring help. So now we come up against like what you call competing against do-it-yourself, like competing against a do-it-yourself option. And so you had an example when you were selling the Challenger sales methodology. I don't know if you want to get into that first to kind of give some context, but then we can start to say, okay, how does this apply to many recruiters who are feeling probably the exact same thing, where instead of, sales leadership, sales structure, it's HR leadership, HR structure.
Yeah. So the quick context is many people have read or have heard of the book, The Challenger Sale. It came out after the 2008, 2009 economic shit show. And it was a massive study of what seller behavior actually was correlated to growth. And tons of people, like millions of copies of this book were sold. But there's a big stark difference between someone who's like, yeah, let's spend, $20 for a book for, 50 salespeople versus someone who's like, let's like completely change our sales methodology and let's get all marketing and product and leadership on the bus and let's throw out everything we've ever done. And so that's what I was selling, was like the 6-7 figure, sales methodology implementation. Very big difference between the two. So that's the context.
Okay. Why did people buy that, Jen? That's pretty easy. Hey, we like the book. Why couldn't you close that deal?
And that was the funny thing. Like I loved Challenger because Challenger really shaped how I sold. And I was so biased because of that, because I couldn't understand why wouldn't you want what I deemed the best sales methodology in the world. But it was because I was never on the buyer's side, right? Like I didn't consider the fact that this person who might love the book, who might have bought a copy for everybody that had a heartbeat in their sales organization, as much as they like it, they have to get a bunch of people on board to change. And I was selling into enterprise, which meant like number one enemy is just, this is the way we've always done it. Change inertia. Not because we're opposed to how you solve the problem, but just because we don't want to go through the mud to go from A to B. And so when I would like let's say one of those inbound leads would come in, I would get super excited because I'm like, all right, they already bought the book. They love Challenger. This is going to be awesome. And then the mistake I made is I would rush right to, let me show you how we would implement it. So you like it, let's get to business. Let's show you how we would do it. And the problem with that is it was like a big, gigantic slap in the face of like, whoa. I thought I could just buy like a $10,000 training workshop. Like I don't have $800,000. So then they would start walking back and be like, I think we're just gonna stick with the book club for now. And then now I'm in it, right? So now I'm like, no, that's a horrible idea, which is the moment that we as salespeople lose credibility. Because now it's like I'm attached to my outcome, not theirs. And so it turned into this like offense-defense dynamic where then I'm telling them they're wrong. Most customers are not going to be like, okay, thank you, sales rep, I am wrong. They're going to defend. And now we've got like two competing forces instead of two people sitting on the same side of the desk. So that's what prompted me to change it, if we want to go there next.
Yeah. I mean, you've already lost the deal at that point. I don't know what you call it there. It's like, are you fighting for pride at that point? Like, yeah, you're wrong. Oh, you're so right, Jen. Send a contract my way. Like, that doesn't, I don't know. There's objection handling and then there's just sticking your head in the mud. So what I liked is you shared, like you flipped that script on its head to figure out, okay, like, what do I do to avoid this scenario altogether? And you had kind of 3 different thought patterns that you went through. So do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah. So instead of the natural instinct, which is to like objection handle, which is I think like the kiss of death of selling. Instead I would say, let me like roll with it, right? You think you want to do a book club internally. Okay. Let me ask some questions about how you're thinking about doing it. I just don't know enough information at this point to tell you you're wrong for doing it. So I need to learn more. So I would say, okay, great. Like, help me understand, what has the group done so far? Was it just like, here's the book, read it if you want? Are you thinking about doing like weekly sessions of the book? Like, are you thinking about doing pre-work, post-work, exercises, role plays? Like, prompting them with ideas, but seeking to understand first and foremost. When you say book club, like what do you specifically uniquely mean by that? So that was step 1.
Yeah. I like that. It's like seek to understand. We want to jump to solutioning so fast. Honestly, I think it was from reading one of your posts lately. I was on a call with a prospect just this morning and they were saying, I don't like this product. It's just not working for us. Very specific use case that we kill it with every time. Goes on to another thing. I could have been like, cool, let me show you how ours works. But I was just like, what didn't you like about it? Because there could be so many different things within that's just like, is it functionality? Is it cost? Is it use case? Is it your workflow? Whatever it is. But it's just like, sometimes just shut yourself up for a second and let them point you in the direction so that you can speak to the right thing. Like you say, like, be curious and seek to understand before you even try to prescribe anything.
That, like that right there is a step most sellers skip over because we smell blood, right? And we're like, there's pain, so that means change. And so it's like, let me get quickly. And I think it's honestly a belief system. Like the faster I move, the faster I show them our product, the faster my deal will close. When I don't know what you think, but in my opinion, my experience was always the opposite. The faster I moved to show them product, the longer the deal lagged late stage because I didn't actually do what you just did so well, which is seek to understand like what is the problem we're even trying to solve here.
Yep. Okay. So you've gone deep. You've asked the why. You understand the problem. What'd you do next?
So then, resisting, instead of going, and now let me tell you why you're wrong. What I would do is I would say, here are a few ideas that I've seen from other companies that have done like a similar book club fashion. Like here's some really smart things I've seen that have worked well. So again, I'm leaning into their idea instead of pushing back on it. And so I would talk about the fact that like, you know, I had another company I talked to and they did this very specific spiff campaign and it worked because, or here was a question that managers started asking in their deal reviews. And I'm doing that because what I'm seeking to do there is build credibility through my insight, not my product. So I want them to start thinking, wow, she seems to know an awful lot about this. Like I feel comfortable and safe, like sharing more. And what would start to happen at this moment is then people would start to open up more because I wasn't pushing them and I wasn't pushing back on them. So I would start to get the right to ask questions like, you know, what gives you cause for concern? Like, let's say we do this. Like, what's the number one thing that you're kind of like a little bit anxious about not working well? And because I'm not trying to pitch them, it feels much more natural at that point in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just they're not as guarded with it and giving you then the canned answer. It's just like, oh, we don't have budget, which I know you have thoughts on what you, how you feel about, sorry, we don't have the budget. That we might have to wrap the episode with that one.
Deal.
All right. So you've gone through that part and then to tie a bow on it, like you've shared your ideas, like how are you kind of ending that?
So then the last thing I would do is some sort of give, because I've built credibility now to say, let me label something I've heard from other organizations that is hard, or the thing that they told me that they're anxious about. I would label something, and it was usually sort of similar things. In this case, it was like the hardest part about doing Challenger was building a Challenger message. Like, how do you not lead with your product? How do you say something insightful that gets them thinking differently about their business? So I would say, listen, like as you do this book club, what often happens is sellers then start pushing on marketing to say, we need more insights. We need more like non-product led messages. Where are those? So what I would recommend is like, why don't we hop on a call and I can give your marketing and sales leadership team some guidance around like things to keep in mind as you're building those, when to release those, how to involve the sales teams. Or if you're already kind of like on the path of doing it and you want a second set of eyes, I'm happy to audit this because I've looked at like hundreds of companies who've done Challenger messages and I can maybe find a couple things that might, you know, increase your likelihood of success. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's a give without expectation of return. Now, clearly, when you have that conversation, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the ability to say, now we're not talking about an idea in theory. Now we're looking at actual work product. And if I can get that call and then everybody comes to that call and we start realizing, wow, we're missing the mark on our messaging, now they are the ones that have seeded doubt. Right. And now it's like, it's such a more natural way for them to say, well, how could we do this differently? And like, is this something you can help with? And so what it ultimately ended up doing by taking that kind of 3-step approach is it created this moment where they started pulling instead of what I was doing before, which is I was just straight pushing. Mm-hmm.
Lead the horse to water. What's that old saying go? Yeah. Where
you know, I'm not good at saying, so I think that's right, but
what's the golden rule about horses? And yeah, no, I mean, it's such a good point for just sitting on the same side of the table is the easiest way to just sum this whole thing up is make sure you're always doing that. Help solve a problem, be the trusted advisor. It's something Morgan and I were just talking about a little bit ago, but it even comes back to what you're saying at the beginning, just like, you're wrong. That's never going to work. How are you rowing in the same direction? So, okay. So that's a good example there. I do want to leave time now at the end to get into this budget thing.
Oh,
But before we
gosh.
do, like, let's talk the art of like proactively managing and closing deals. So we can get tactical with this. We can share any examples or something, but I'll almost call it, in the software world, we call it like stage 2, stage 3. Like they've got budget, they're qualified, they've got the authority to sign, but this is often where a lot can go wrong if it's not managed properly. So maybe the first one is, when someone brings on an agency recruiter, especially for a high level position, it's not cheap. Like this is a significant budget order. The excitement's there, but how do you keep things progressing? I know some people like to use the words urgency, and I don't know that urgency is quite the right word, but like, so things don't just like fall flat, but like, how are you keeping the conversation moving so that you're able to I guess, keep the deal on track and get it signed in the end?
Yeah, you'll notice a theme with everything I talk about. I think like good selling always starts in the beginning of the sale so that you're not paying the consequences later. So for anyone that doesn't follow Nate Nasrallah, he's an awesome, awesome voice on this topic. He and I see the world very similarly about what actually creates urgency is not discount threats or, FUD, like fear, uncertainty, doubt, and trying to flame that. And your house is going to be on fire if you don't act now. Like that stuff is very, very transparent to an informed buyer. What I think does matter is earlier in the cycle, did you align on a common definition or measurement of what is it costing us to not change? And that actually has nothing to do with your product, right? If you and I'm by no means an expert in your world and the world of the listeners, but if I think about it from an outsider's perspective, there is an unintended negative consequence for example, a role sitting open for a long time. And people want to do what's familiar to them because familiar feels safe. So if I'm recruiting for a role and I've always done it in-house or I've always posted on LinkedIn, I feel safe doing that because it worked at one point. And so mid-cycle deals where they tend to fall apart, in my experience, were deals that were built on like the ROI or upside of a product, but they never really fully established the cost of inaction of doing nothing differently. And I'm very specific in the way I say that. Some people say like the cost of doing nothing. Nobody's doing nothing. If you have a role to fill, you're not just like, I hope someone reaches out
Someone's gonna
without
walk into the office. Hey,
hiring.
I'm gonna start dialing. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, right? Like everybody's doing something. But what we often fail to appreciate is like, because we've always done it that way, it becomes normalized. We don't recognize when like the industry shifts or something changes. And now it's made the way we've always solved it expensive. So it's a very long answer, but I think where I would see my deals fall apart is where I had a happy-eared champion who was excited about the solution. But then when it came time to talk to their CFO or their CEO or their owner, and the owner was like, why do we need to act on this now? Or why can't we just do it in-house? It was literally the first time that person ever thought of that. And so they're humming and hawing through an answer, which meant it got stuck. And so like, I want to have that conversation with my buyer because I want them thinking through that with me, not being put on the spot with whoever approves the budget or the plan to say like, oh, I don't know. I never considered why we don't just keep doing it ourselves.
Yeah. So are you fielding those questions for them ahead of time? Like in a document, are you talking through it live? Like, yeah, guys, there's a lot of recruiters here. This is new territory for them as they're thinking about business development. You've done this countless times. Like what worked for you? Is it a Google
Yeah.
Doc? Is it just a live chat? How are
One
you?
page, like your girl here ain't sophisticated when it comes to technology, but like I'm thinking like one page PowerPoint or Canvas slide, whatever is your poison. It has to fit on a page because that is the attention span that your buyer will have. Like one of the best learning experiences I had, I used to create like 30-page decks so that my champion could socialize the solution.
How
Nobody
sophisticated
used
this
that.
is.
Yeah, like they were beautiful. Nobody friggin' none of those pages ever saw the light of day. And the most enlightening thing is when I my champion in one of my deals said, "Do you want to see what I actually used to get buy-in for this?" And I was like, "Yeah," thinking she was gonna be like, "Your deck," and instead it was like the ugliest one-page PowerPoint in like Times New Roman format. But what she did is she had laid out, here's the objective for the business. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's the problem we're encountering it's making it harder for us to achieve that objective. Here's the way we're solving it today. And now let's have a discussion around how much that is actually costing us and what the consequences are by continuing to do that. And so what was interesting about it is she wasn't telling the group, she was giving an opinion, but she was seeking a disagreement. So she was saying like, here's how I see it. Who disagrees? And that totally changed the way I sold, because I realized most of us in sales, we seek agreement because agreement means forward progress on a deal. Instead, now I'm asking questions of my champion, like, who is most likely to want to protect status quo? Who is most likely to be skeptical of focusing on this versus another priority? And what would be that other priority that they want to do instead? And so I'm actually seeking bad news. I want to be ahead of that. I don't want to receive bad news late, because now it's like, it's done. So I think it means that we as salespeople have to get really comfortable with asking questions that may result in things that we don't like to hear. But when we know that information, that gives us power early to be able to know what to do with it. Once I'm a recipient of it late, it's like, well, it's done, it's done.
Yeah, the decision's made. That's so interesting. Yeah, because even when you find out who that stick in the mud is, if it's a CFO, you can help guide them. Okay, here's what they're caring about. They're caring about cost. They're caring about this. They're caring about that. CTO, change management. What's this mean for the tech stack and security issues? Like, you can help guide all that stuff because you've seen it before. This isn't your first time selling this product or anything else. You touched on cost of inaction in there. I know we covered it in the last episode, but why is that part, do you think, so important in the, like, we have this problem, here's what's going on, here's what happens if we don't, if we keep on course right now versus here's this alternative? Why do you think that highlighting that part of like, here's what happens if we don't do anything about this today or keep on course, why is that this like X factor in the process?
No one has ever asked me this question, believe it or not. I love that you asked this question because it's so important. The short answer is because it mirrors how buyers make decisions. Like if you look at any business, I don't care if you're selling K-12, you're selling a small private company, SMB, enterprise, whoever, everyone has someone at the top of the house who sets a set of business objectives for that company for the year. Like we're going to do X, Y, and Z. They're specific and they're measurable. And then every single leader that works underneath that owner, CEO, founder, then is going to make this really long list of risks that could go wrong that would be their fault. Like if I'm a sales leader and we have a goal to grow 40% in the enterprise or 40% in EMEA, and I don't find enough talent to hit that, well, that's a me problem. And I'm gonna be the one that pays that consequence. So they build this really long list of all the stuff that could go wrong, and then reality sets in. Because there's a great, Nate Nasrallah was the one who shared this with me. There's a great Reid Hoffman quote that said, being an executive is largely about figuring out which fires to let burn. And what that means is like, there are big fires and small fires everywhere. There's just not enough people, budget, and time to put them all out. So we knowingly have to let some of those risks on that list stay. Even though we know they're painful, even though we know they're not ideal, right? But they have to stay because we have to make trade-offs around where we invest. So cost of inaction mirrors exactly how that buyer goes through that list and said, what fire can we afford to let go on? Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's like when you think like your buyer thinks and you start thinking in terms of like risk mitigation versus, benefit realization, which is how we tend to think in sales, it just makes you feel, look, and sound like you've been there before versus like, I'm a sales rep and this is my thing. And like, how much of it do you want?
Here's our pitch. You're going to get 10x ROI. Yeah.
Because any seller has ever said like negative ROI.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just marinating on that right now because it's so true. I'm thinking immediately to how we can use this and everything else. But it is, like you said, it's what do buyers actually think as they go through it. So we've got cost of inaction documented. You've kept some urgency going. How can we follow up that's not just some version of, hey, just bumping this message along or any of those other, like we want to follow up. We want to stay on top of things, but sometimes like even I'll do this. Like I usually do it internally because I don't care. I'm just like, guys, I need an update. But with a client, with a prospect, like you need to have a better reason than that because your internal teammates, you can find them on Slack or somewhere else. But with clients or prospects, you don't have to. So what have you found to just be like a good way to do a follow-up that keeps things moving along that isn't a nuisance or a nudge?
Yeah. So there are a lot of people that will say like, you should always have a next step. And I'm like, yeah, you should. But the reality is sometimes we don't. And like, I live in reality, not in sales theory, la la land. And so let's say you're working one of those deals and you don't have a next step plan and you thought it was going to move faster and it didn't. There's two paths I will take. And it's largely dictated by like what kind of relationship I built with this person. If they are direct, if we have built like really good rapport, that's where I might send that email that I mentioned before around, did we hit an unexpected roadblock when trying to X? And X is whatever job to be done. Like when trying to get your CFO's approval, when trying to get a team meeting so we can talk about what this might look like, whatever. And I say we intentionally because I'm not trying to finger point, like, did you screw this up? So that's a very short email. The intention is to just make it easy and without blame to get information. Like, it's okay if the answer is, yeah, we hit a roadblock, but then it opens the door for me to be like, can you help me understand what happened? In a way that feels constructive. So that's option one. Option two might be like, let's say I've spent less time with them. I'm not as comfortable with that. I might say, let me find something related to the problem that they were sharing with me, the thing we're ultimately trying to solve, that actually doesn't come from my business, but maybe is like, I saw an interview with someone or I saw an article. And instead of being like, here's a link to a 2,000 word article, what I'll do is I'll say, thought like a message, like the subject line might be like WSJ article. And I'll put in the email, like, saw this interview with Acme Company talking about the same thing you were up against. This like quote here made me think of you. And something that feels in service to their problem or what they're thinking about that honestly isn't self-serving to me. Like I typically wouldn't be like, here's a LinkedIn post I wrote that was amazing and you should read it, because that just feels kind of icky to me. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just not my style. But I think it shows that you're really thinking through the lens of what they're trying to do instead of just constantly trying to get the thing that you want.
Yep. Yeah. And it's still adding value. Like that could almost be a gut check in itself. Before you send the email, like, is this adding value to them in some way? Hey, looking for an update, or if it's your own post, it's like, oh, you seeking a like, or hey, I wrote this anonymous, passive aggressive post about you and how I haven't heard back. Like, what do you think? But no, it's like, this is another company like you that struggled with the same problem. I thought, there's some other stuff that we could learn from it, whatever it may be.
Can I give you an example of one that someone did for me when I was at Lavender that I just like has always stood out to me?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
They noticed that I went from being a sales rep to chief evangelist to this head of community growth, and kudos to them. They were like, she's never done that job. So instead of being like, where are we at with this? They sent me an email. It was super short. It was like, hey, I came across this, how to lead a community 101 article, and I thought like page 2 and 4 were really interesting because it outlined like the different ways of thinking about community, not just starting a Slack community. And I was like, this is so good. And it didn't have anything to do with what he was selling to me, but that's what made it work. Is I was like, he really I feel like he's kind of looking out for me. And so maybe that's a helpful example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all the things that we've touched on here. Morgan and I were touching on. It's like, be human, helpful, put yourself in their shoes. Like, you're going to win the deal. Like, it doesn't have to be fully related to him. Like, Morgan loves pickleball right now. Like, hey, do you see this video of this guy's new trick shot or whatever? Like,
yes,
that's what's going to land. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got the contract out to them. I don't want to say you haven't heard back from them, because I don't want to get just like, oh my God, like, what's going on? But how are you finalizing that deal in those last steps? Like, what are you doing to reiterate confidences? What are you doing to help make sure it gets across the line? Like, how involved are you, or just anything for people listening who, this might be, they only close a few deals a year, or they just started an agency last year and they're still figuring it out. This is only their 10th rep at it. Like, how are you navigating this?
Yeah. So one, I think, is before I'm sending the contract, like, I'm seeking to understand what has to happen on their side. And I think we all want the answer of like, I just got to get a signature, but we have to have the smarts to be like, hey, and I usually try to make a joke out of it. Like, gosh, it was always that easy. Like, I'd be on a beach somewhere, not like sitting here talking to you. But I'll say, like, often what happens is there's one unexpected person who ends up wanting to put their stamp on it. If you had to think of who that person might be in your business, who would that be? Right. And like, sit there for a second, let an uncomfortable silence happen. Or if you had to guess the one reason why this thing doesn't come to life, like, what is that reason? Because I think if you know those things before you send the contract, then if you send that contract and you don't hear something, you can come back and say, hey, did this thing we talked about, did that actually happen, or was it something else? So it's more specific, which is why I like that approach. So like, a lot of the things I talk about, so much of it is not how do I handle it when it happens? It's like, what can I do before it to preempt it? And then if it does happen, now I have a different approach other than like, where's the contract and what's up, dude? So that's kind of my preferred approach, is like kind of test for some of those reasons it might not get signed early, so that if you hit a like a, deafening silence, you can put it out there safely and say like, did this like unfortunate thing kind of happen, or was it something else? And they'll correct you because humans love to correct. It's just basic psychology.
Yeah, your clothes, Jen. I've been meaning to tell you still.
I know, they're busted. That's why I wear the same black shirt on every one of these that I do.
Steve Jobs. Demand jobs. Demand Jen jobs. Okay. No, I mean, this is a masterclass. Honestly, I wish I had this when I was BDR. I mean, I'm going to honestly share this with our sales team too, but any other just thoughts around this conversation as a whole, thinking about our audience, things that you've learned, you've seen, just quick tips, learnings, things to avoid?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is like, stop trying to hear the rosy story you want to hear. Any good deal has friction. Some friction's early, some friction's middle, some friction's late. I ideally want friction early. So slow down. Like, there is a time and place to talk about your solution. But what I saw happen in many of my deals that I lost, either to a competitor or to no decision, which was the bigger competitor for me, it was because I was in such a rush to show them what we do, because that's where I felt most confident, like in subject matter, that I totally missed things that ended up hurting me in the end. And then it's happened, right? Like now I'm objection handling. So wherever possible, just like seek the bad news early. Your buyer will also respect you for not trying to make it like this is some easy thing to do, because often it's not.
Yeah. Get proactive. I mean, moral of the story, ABM, get proactive, ABP, get proactive, like get ahead of deals. It's all,
Amen.
The more you get ahead of prepare for, the easier you make yourself in the long run, like you said. So Jen, this was fun. For those listening who don't already stalk you, where can they find you?
I love the idea that anyone would stalk a 43-year-old influencer. You can find me at demandjenwithaj.com, or where I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. That's my
I think
only
every
social
recruiter
media.
can relate to that. Yeah, that's the
Right?
future. Better for worse for them. Well, Jen, appreciate you joining us for round 2. Might have to make a competition between you and Morgan, who gets invited to round 3 first. I know you sales
Oh
reps love
my.
a little bit of a healthy competition there.
I would lose to
But
Morgan any day, happily. He's the man.
he's awesome. Well, you guys are gonna have a fun trip in Europe before long, when you guys are both going to speak out there. So, all right. Well, thank you again for joining. Truly appreciate it as always. And yeah, so everyone listening, that's a wrap. That's a show. That's another great interview episode with Jen Allen. Till next time. Bye, y'all.